very, very warm welcome to this seminar to discuss the implications of the Finance Bill 2012. A very special welcome to Mr. Salve, who's here with us today, despite his extremely busy schedule. In fact, he's just arrived early morning, and yet he said, I'll be there, don't worry. I'll be there exactly in time. Mr. Salve needs no introduction to business community, but I must mention that he was the Solicitor General of India from 1999 to 2002. And one more thing, he belongs to our fraternity. In fact, when he started, after qualifying as a chartered accountant, he started practice in taxation and thereafter switched over to law. So today he handles a variety of matters, including taxation matters, constitution law, companies, commercial laws, and any area that one can think of. With that, may I once again extend a warm welcome to Mr. Salve. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Madam President, Mr. Hiranandani, President-elect, Mr. Vora, ladies and gentlemen. When Bhavna asked me to come and speak to you about the retrospective amendments, I was in two minds whether I should or should not. And the reason is that apart from the economic consequences, apart from its legalities, about which I do not propose to speak, because I think they are irrelevant today, a bigger question has arisen. We need to step back and see what is the message of 2012. Where have we reached? Where are we going? And that I thought was far too serious and maybe a boring subject for a Saturday morning. But her persuasive skills are such I couldn't say no. And so here I am, and I want to start on a note of nostalgia. The last I attended a meeting of the Indian Merchants Chamber was when my late Guru, Mr. Palkhewala, was speaking. And he was speaking 30 years back on preparing India for the 21st century. He spoke of institutions, he spoke of philosophies, policies, as only he could. We are a decade into the 21st century, and it's time to see where we are. And I take these amendments which are proposed as a testimony to a direction, as a testimony to institutions, as a testimony to India. And I think apart from the legal nuances, which you have experts far better versed than me in the law who will be addressing you in the technical sessions, it is necessary to see them in their global context. It is necessary to see them in the context of where our politics is going, or where we are going as a nation. And it is necessary to draw some conclusions of what we as citizens of India should be doing in what is now accepted to be the participatory process of governance. The world is today a very fast-changing place, and I think the last 5 to 7 years, the last half decade particularly, has seen unprecedented pain. Europe, which was the crown jewel of the world, today looks economically desolate. Politicians promise in their countries that recovery is round the corner. As somebody said, but the corner has been 5 years away, and it doesn't show any signs of showing up. Austerity continues and has led only to more austerity. what is interesting to see in Europe, it's a measure of some discomfort, but a measure of some comfort, depending on how you look at it. What is interesting to see is the reaction to austerity in Europe today is very different from the reaction to austerity you saw in the post-war years. Post-war Europe was a model of change for the better. Post-war Europe was a model of discipline. Post-war Europe was a model of hard work. The assimilation of Germany into the European mainstream and its ascent to a point that today it leads Europe. Look back at 1940, when the war was towards its end, the most hated nation. A nation blamed for bringing more than 70% of mankind to despair. Today leads Europe. But what's the mood today in Europe? Do you see today the same determination, the same grit, the same discipline which pulled them out of the post-war depression? I don't see that. There is a very interesting phenomenon. When Mr. Palkhiwala spoke in 1982 about India's place in the 21st century, he said, one day we will be global. And how true he was. We are truly global today. But that has its pitfalls. The pitfalls are that we cannot today be isolationist. We cannot take growth for granted on the premise that if we release more liquidity, we will have more consumption. If we have more consumption, we will have more production. And the Indian cycle will go on uninfluenced by the storms outside. We today question a premise which was taken for granted. Not just in India, we do it world over. When Mr. Palkhiwala spoke in 1982, he used to always give the example of democracy versus autocracy. And he used to always say what he called the East-West, North-South example. He says, how many people try to escape into West Germany? And have you ever heard of anybody trying to escape from West Germany to East Germany? How many people try to run from South Korea to North Korea? Have you ever heard of anybody trying to run from South Korea to North Korea? It all went from north to south. This was the East-West, North-South of democracy versus the leftist ideology debate. And this continued. But globally, this premise is under challenge. This premise was based on what was then considered by the theoreticians, the exogenous model of growth. Today we have accepted that that's not really the growth paradigm. The growth paradigm is the endogenous model of growth, where it is driven by investment in human capital. It is driven by innovation. Once we accepted that growth is driven by investment in human capital, by investment in innovation. By mid-90s, 1995, Barrow and his group of social scientists in Harvard University challenged the correlation of democracy and growth. Because they said, on a detailed empirical study, that growth has not necessarily gone hand in hand with democracy. Because, and this is very interesting for us today, in fact it's interesting for the Western world, but equally for us today. They said the endogenous model is inherently flawed. Now why is it inherently flawed? Because it rewards innovation. It accentuates inequalities. The hardworking, the skilled, the risk takers earn more the rich grow richer. They carry with them development, but the perception is that the rich grow richer, and that is always challenged as being opposed to social justice. It is not inclusive growth. In fact, according to them, inclusive growth was an oxymoron. Overall development is what raised the level of society, but growth always came from the top.